You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Friday the 13th of September. The 49ers looking to make things scary for the Vikings in Minnesota on Sunday. They fly out later today, but they got some bad news today regarding Christian McCaffrey. Seems like he's going to be out for Sunday's game once again. Joining me to talk about that and preview this game as well as Kyle Posey of Niners Nation. How you doing today, KP?
Good. I think things are going to get spooky for Sam Darnold on Sunday, but I didn't even know it was Friday the 13th until you said that. Yeah, so,
like perfect theme. Keep me seeing Ghost.
There we go. we got to get right to CMC, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we do have our injury designations for Sunday's game, and we have our injury correspondent here, Desi. I just wanted to feel cool calling you the injury correspondent. But Desi, thank you for joining us today. We got an update from Christian McCaffrey. Like I said, right before we went live, he was declared out for week 2. Kyle Shanahan said it was McCaffrey's worst day in terms of pain. He did not join the team for practice today. And injured reserve is now highly being considered. Desi, I want to ask you this. For an injury like this Achilles tendonitis that likes to flare up intermittently, how much does resting it help, really? Oh, I can't hear you, Desi. And yeah, still can't hear you. All right, well, as she gets those her audio situated, that's kind of like my thing, right? Because like Achilles tendonitis, Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch have kind of mentioned it as something that flares up, right? And so I don't know how convinced I am that that rest really is something that can help it long term. Desi, do we have your audio now?
Do we sound good?
Yes, there we go.
We're good? Okay.
There we go.
It's the gold standard treatment is what I was saying is rest. That is the gold standard. And at this point, my concerns for the possibility of a boot is becoming a little bit more. What I've been saying is I don't know the chronicity of this, meaning I know he was dealing with this towards the end of last season. Did he get complete resolution over the summer and it just flared as he came back? Or has he even been battling this during the summer? If that's the case, I definitely, my suspicions for a treatment with the boot would become higher. If it's not, then, I think we still have a little bit of time before that decision needs to be made until you made the comment that today was his worst day yet. Then that would mean that all the modalities that they've been doing up until this point is not helping to subside his symptoms. And, we may be looking at putting him on injured reserve and putting him in a boot.
Now, if he is placed in a boot, how long does that should one typically wear that with Achilles tendonitis?
4 to 6 weeks, could be longer, depending on what they see on, additional imaging, if there's partial tears or anything like that. But it needs some time to calm down. It's, I would say 4 to 6 weeks, and then you've got to rehab it back. So this could take out a good chunk of the season for sure, probably 3 months, plus or minus a couple of weeks. Maybe we can get away with 2.5 months. But, I think that's what they're trying to analyze is how much can we afford for him to be out? What's the timeline looking like? There's lots of things to consider with this injury and in this particular athlete.
Yeah, it's definitely not encouraging news. And Desi, I want to give you some credit because last week we were talking about this injury. You mentioned Achilles tendonitis. I don't think the 49ers had actually used the word tendonitis to describe this injury yet, at least publicly. So it seems like you're kind of ahead of the curve on this one. But I know this is one that you wish you weren't right about. And so we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. I'm sure they'll make a decision here within the next couple of days whether or not to place him on IR. At least that's the impression that Kyle Shanahan left me with. So we'll continue to see on that. I do have more positive news, I guess, from Kyle Shanahan. Ricky Pearsall also was working out this week, didn't have any setbacks. So that's great to hear for him. And it seems like he's on track to return as early as week 5 with the team. Talanoa Hufanga is doubtful for this game. Desi, do you think like another week maybe would be good for him? I mean, it seems like he's been ramping up and it's progressing well.
Yeah, I think we saw towards the end of training camp, he was able to participate in football specific activities. And then he just joined practice just a couple weeks ago. I would say a solid 4 weeks of contact practice, I think will suit him up well. So I wasn't expecting him to return until like probably early October, maybe the last week of September. So I think it's still right on track for what we expect with his injury.
Yep. And D. Winters is questionable for this game, so he may make his debut. We do know that Yetur Gross-Matos, new player on the defensive line for the 49ers, will be making his debut on Sunday for sure, so that is great news. Desi, thank you so much for those updates. As always, appreciate having you on. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, thank you. Go Niners.
Let's go. All right, so KP, let's take a quick look at the Vikings injury statuses for this game. A pretty big one. Jordan Addison is going to be out for the Vikings. He exploded for 123 yards and 2 touchdowns against the 49ers as a rookie last season. So I'm sure the 49ers may be a little relieved that he will be out for this game. But, of course, they're going to have Justin Jefferson, which we'll talk about here in a bit as well. But yeah, Addison going to be out for this one. Let's take a look at some of the not so favorable matchups. I always like to start there. Before we do that, let's just look at the Vikings defense. A lot of new faces for this Vikings defense. They still have the same defensive coordinator, of course, in Brian Flores, but they replaced Lowry with Jerry Tillery, Hunter and Wonum with Jonathan Greenard and Andrew Van Ginkel. And Van Ginkel looked great in week 1. They replaced Hicks with Blake Cashman, and then 2 new starting corners, Stephon Gilmore and Shaq Griffin. So a revamped defense for Brian Flores and this team. And I think that's where I want to start with the not so favorable matchups for the 49ers. I kind of see this as a challenge. Obviously, Brian Flores presented some challenges for Brock Purdy the last time that the 49ers played in Minnesota, week 7 of last season. And Brock Purdy, when he was asked about Brian Flores and this defense, he did call this defense an illusion fest. And it very much so is that, they just disguise coverages. They do a lot of different things post snap. So what kind of challenges could this present for Brock Purdy this week, you think?
Yeah, so I think it's important. So when you think about what happened last year, week 7, whatever it was, like he had the couple turnovers late, and people remember, the 49ers losing and those turnovers, but Brock was blitzed a ton. Like he blitzed him like 80% of the time. And Shanahan even acknowledged that that's the norm for Brian Flores, but he also went 15 for 19 against the blitz last year. So he carved him up, and he did very well against the blitz. And I think this year they're going to have better outlets for Brock this time. So I think the 49ers are actually pretty well suited to handle what they're going to see this year, as opposed to going in last year with obviously, I think that was when it was in the stretch of, Trent Williams, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, and obviously no McCaffrey this time. But last year, when they faced teams who ran like that too high shell that you just showed the Vikings do run a lot, which it's kind of counterintuitive. When you think you're going to run blitz, you think you're going to get like a bunch of single coverage, but that's not what the Vikings do. But when they do go against these too high safeties, that's where Deebo Samuel actually makes his mark. So that's a very good check down option that they're going to have. And obviously, if just Brock just takes advantage of his one-on-ones, they'll be good there. So they have good players. There's no doubt about it. If Harrison Smith can go, he's a guy that you have to keep an eye on because he always finds a way around the ball. Ivan Pace, who's their linebacker, is a very, very good blitzer. So this week actually is going to be very big for Jordan Mason, and not running the ball, but in pass protection. So if he can identify, where the blitzes are coming from, keep Brock upright, that'll go a long way. And also Brock, his legs, right? He had one scramble last week where he ran for a first down. I don't think it's going to be just one opportunity this week. I think there are going to be a few times where it might look like closer to Packers-Lions playoff game where, the second half he's running and creating things for the offense with his legs. So it is kind of interesting to see, but I think they do have more favorable matchups. And I think people are a little basically naturally just focusing on what you remember last time. And that was the turnovers and whatnot. But they have some advantages. They have quite a few advantages, actually. The one thing that I would be worried about is last week, the 49ers offensive line, they were just probably, like, since I've been covering the team in 2019, it's probably one of the best performances I've seen out of them. So, like, will they be able to replicate that success against a team that is going to come at them from every which angle? That's going to be something to keep an eye on. So if they can even give 80% of what they did last year, they'll be fine. Or last week, they'll be okay.
Yeah, for sure. Brock Purdy has been one of the best against the blitz. But I guess, like, the way Minnesota has historically done it is, yes, they blitz a lot. And as we see here, 63.6% of Purdy's dropbacks last season in that game is how much they blitzed him. And Brock Purdy did a pretty decent job against that as well, although he did have the one interception. I think the challenge, in addition to the blitzing, is that when they do disguise and they do mix up coverages like post snap, that does make the quarterback think just a second longer about what's actually happening. What is he seeing? And so that's the challenge that I think Brock Purdy is going to be facing this week. But it isn't all about Purdy, though. In week 7 last season, Flores' defense limited the 49ers to 0 explosive runs and their lowest yards per carry average of the 2023 season. And that was with Christian McCaffrey. Yeah. Of course, they didn't have Trent Williams. They didn't have Debo, but no Christian McCaffrey this time for the 49ers. So I'm with you. I do think that they're going to try to test Jordan Mason in pass protection, because I do think that's one area that maybe that's why he hasn't seen the field as much as us 49er fans like expect that he would. So I think they're definitely going to send extra men in and see how he holds up in pass pro. So that's definitely something that I'm interested to see in this game. Now, last season, when the Vikings played against the 49ers, they were doing a lot of like 6-man fronts. And here I have an image of it. I think the 49ers condensed formation. They love to do that. But actually, surprisingly, in week 1 against the Giants last week, it seemed like they were doing a lot of 4-man fronts. 75.5% of their snaps, they rushed with 4 defenders. So I don't know if that's like a shift in philosophy. I don't think so, if I had to guess.
I think they were just playing possum for what's coming up right now.
That's so I was one of that too. More illusion from Brian Flores. Like, that was kind of my instinction as well. And then also it was the Giants. Like, you don't necessarily have to
Daniel Jones, we can be honest about yes.
You don't have to be aggressive to beat Daniel Jones. But yes, after week 1, the Vikings defense ranks 2nd in sacks with 5, and they're 4th in defensive DVOA. So a great performance in week 1 from them. And I know the question you were asking is, how is this offensive line of the 49ers going to hold up? Because they looked really good in week 1 and certainly looked better than they have, I think, at any point last season. I think part of that is with the addition of Dominic Pooney. I don't know, KP, if you ever look at the composite score that Ben B. Baldwin puts out on Twitter every week. He puts like all these charts out, and he has the composite score that pretty much compiles all the like different ratings and grades from 3 different sites. I believe it's like PFF, ESPN. Anyway, the 49ers were ranked, their offensive line was ranked 13th. I was so surprised because I don't think at any point last season they were in like the first column, like 1 through 17. Like
the bar was so low.
So low. And I think seeing them at 13, I was like very pleasantly surprised, but like they did look better in week 1. So I'm hoping that they can continue on with that. And I think that's going to be a big key for them this week if they could sustain that success against this Vikings front.
No, I thought that they leaned on the offensive line in a way that they never have under Shanahan. So, like, obviously Jordan Mason's going to get a ton of credit, as he should. Like, he broke 14 tackles, which is more than anybody in the league in week 1. But I would still give more credit to what the line produced as opposed to Mason kind of creating for himself. So, like, Trent Williams was Trent Williams. He was aggressive and he was knocking people over. There were a couple plays where, you know, Jake Brendel messed up and Colt McKibben messed up, but over the course of like a 60 game sample size or 60 play sample size, they were like legit. And honestly, Pooney looks like he's already their second best lineman. That was true in the preseason, but just seeing it live, you can tell, honestly, on the first play of the game, it's like, oh, this guy is the real deal. So I think having the ability to run not just behind Trent, but Mason averaged 6.4 yards per carry running inside the tackles. Like, that was never a thing last year. They really struggled to run inside the tackles. And obviously it's a 1 game sample size, but to do it against the Jets, do it against Quinnen Williams, like, that is a big deal. And I don't think that they're going to have the same issues. Obviously, you know, the Vikings might load the box. They might see more 6-man fronts if they do blitz, but if they do that, it's just one crease, right? You make one guy miss and Mason's off to the races. And another thing that was really surprising, like when you create lanes for Mason, I don't think people realize he is a fast player. Like, he is not this because he can run over you. It doesn't mean he's like slower. He had actually tied for the most 15-mile-per-hour runs last year with Lamar, or only Lamar Jackson had more 15-mile-per-hour runs than Jordan Mason in week 1. So like, he can go, he can move a little bit. So if they are able to create a crease for him, and he can break it, it's off to the races.
He definitely looked a lot faster to me in training camp this year. So whatever he did this offseason as far as conditioning, and I know Kyle Shanahan has talked about that as well, that he worked on his conditioning this offseason. Whatever he did, it worked out for him. And I did see earlier today he was doing some workouts with Fred Warner and the linebackers. So, hey, they're definitely going to push anyone who trains with them. Another not so favorable matchup to me, or just one I'm a little cautious of this week, is, of course, Justin Jefferson, because I think obviously Justin Jefferson, the best wide receiver in the game. I know the 49ers went up against a pretty good wide receiver last week in Garrett Wilson, right? But nothing like Justin Jefferson. He is in a tier of his own, in my opinion. And we already know that Addison's not going to be in this game. So Sam Darnold's only reliable outlet is Justin Jefferson, and I think he's going to be looking for him on every drop back, just kind of like we saw with Aaron Rodgers early in the game, looking for Garrett Wilson. That could be a good thing for the 49ers in a sense, because you kind of know what he's going to be looking for, and you can kind of key in on that. But I think Justin Jefferson is the kind of guy that's like matchup proof. Like, you can put a lot of resources into stopping him, and I think he's just the kind of guy who's going to continue to get his anyway. So I guess that's my concern, or what I would be cautious about in this game. But yeah, definitely expecting that Sam Darnold's going to be looking for Jefferson on every play.
Objectively, one of the 1, 2, or 3, like, there's no way he's number 4 in the NFL. Like, he's probably 1, and if he's not 1, he's 2, and if he's not 2, then like 3 is the floor. But this guy is like unbelievable when it comes to route running, when it comes to speed, when it comes to cutting, when it comes to anything that involves wide receivering. Like, he is very good. What I would be worried about, if you remember, the Jets had a couple plays where they had success on 3rd down, where they're just crossing the middle, right? And most of that was they're basically high-low in Devondre Campbell, so they're getting him stuck. And when you do that, you leave Jefferson on a linebacker, like, he's going to win that every time. So I would be worried about that. Darnold hit Jefferson on one deep shot. That's probably going to happen, right? Like, they're going to attack, whether it's Lenore in the slot down the field, because if there is one weakness for Lenore, it's that deep speed, and that's where you kind of tend to hide guys in the slot. But there are a lot of ways to manipulate coverage and isolate him one-on-one down the field, or getting him matched up on George Odom, who's a little reckless last week. So, like, those would be the 3 defenders, like, whether it's Lenore down the field. Lenore, anything 15 in, he's money in the bank. Campbell in space, would not trust that and just owed him one-on-one down the field is what I'd be worried about. Honestly, if I'm Kevin O'Connell, I'm doing what the Rams did with Cooper Kupp on Sunday night and just throwing the ball every time. And if it's incomplete, it's incomplete. But if I'm the 49ers, that's the opposite direction, right? Hey, if I lose because Jalen Naylor beat me, then so be it. If I lose because 49ers legend of training camp Trent Sherfield beats me, then so be it. But I could not go down swinging with Justin Jefferson with a stat line of like 12 for 150 and 3. Like, there's no way. And one interesting thing was last week, Aaron Rodgers, he wanted nothing to do with Charvarius Ward. Like, they didn't even look his way. They threw it to him late a couple times, but the game was out of hand. So I wonder if they just load up that side of the field and kind of attack, whether it's a slot, whether it's a Yidam, who's a very good, like, he's the kind of corner that, can run with Jefferson. So it'll be pretty interesting. I do like the Niners' advantages, though, elsewhere.
So that's what I was going to ask you about, KP, because I've gotten that question a few times this week is, will Mooney Ward shadow Justin Jefferson, just seeing how, I guess, like, dominant he was in week 1 that Aaron Rodgers didn't even throw his way. And then I do want to point out, too, out of 46 snaps last week, Jefferson played 21 on the right side. So that would have him lining up against Mooney Ward the majority of the time. He also had 14 snaps on the left side, 11 snaps in the slot. But do you feel like that's something the 49ers would do? I kind of get the sense that the 49ers trust all of their corners. Like, I know you mentioned just like Lenore, maybe struggles with some of those guys that have speed or 15 yards plus. But, I still think that they trust their guys to, cover well enough in those cases. So do you see them shadowing Justin Jefferson at all?
It's tough just because I imagine it'll go by situation, right? So last year we can use last year as an example, but that was also Steve Wilkes. By the way, real quick sidebar, do you remember after the game last year, Nick Bosa on the podium, backpack on, slumped over, basically just pissed off at Steve Wilkes, talking about, yeah, we used to rush forward, man. This is not what I'm used to. Like, he was calling him out. And that's when the flip came. That's when he moved from the booth to the side. I just watched that presser today, and I was like, oh, this is where they really lost hope in Wilkes. Yeah. But to your point, no, unless it's like you get a situation where, he's lined up in a linebacker, they're in man coverage, and you have no choice but to have Ward or Yidam follow him over. But I just think they're going to sit back and play coverage, honestly, keep everything in front of them and make Sam Darnold think, which is what you want to do.
Right. And 54% of Darnold's targets went to the right side in week 1 as well. So maybe he wants to test out Mooney Ward. I don't know, but that's going to be.
He only played in the slot 1 snap last week, by the way. Mooney.
Oh, he was in the slot once. Okay.
Only on once. Yeah.
Okay. That's going to be interesting to see in this matchup. But before we get to the favorable ones, as always, a little break to remind you guys to download the Locker app. Look for the league name 49K once you get your account. And if you use the promo code WIN, you get a deposit match up to $100. So make sure you guys use that. And also, this week only, for week 2, you get a chance at the $5,000 prize pool. You can enter it for free. It started yesterday, but you can still get in before the slate of Sunday games. So make sure you guys do that. But all right, let's look at some of the favorable matchups for the 49ers. I know, partially we did talk about the blitzing stuff. Of course, we know that Brock Purdy historically has been really good against the blitz, but he's also pretty good against zone. And the Vikings were in zone coverage, the second most of any team in 2023. And you look at Purdy's numbers against zone last season, 61.9% throw rate, 68% completion percentage, 103.8 passer rating. And I think a lot of what makes Brock Purdy so good against zone is that some of his other guys are good against zone, like Debo. Debo's great against zone. I know you were talking about the too high as well that Debo's good at. This is where he gets those yak opportunities, right? So, and especially in this case, we're talking about Purdy needing to get the ball out quickly. I think like you said earlier, Debo is going to be a huge outlet for him in this game. Find those zones and, get some extra yardage after the catch. So Debo against zone in 2023, 55.4 win rate, 25.7% target rate, and 2.64 yards average target separation. That's almost like a yard extra of when he's against man. So zone definitely his bread and butter and where he is best. And that's why I think it benefits Purdy as well.
Yeah, so I mean, one of his biggest issues, right, is separating underneath against man coverage. And now he can just sit down in a hole. And actually, the 49ers, one of their actually the person who had the most yards against zone last year was Juwan Jennings. So one of the big news was he's off the injury report. So he had an ankle injury and he left early. So he's really good, man. And I think we kind of saw that last week, how they're kind of leaning on him more as a wide receiver 2 or running these wide receiver 2 type of routes. So he gave Brock a big body target over the middle. And I think just watching it back, Jennings gives him just more margin for error, like more room for error. So you can throw it basically high, low, and he's going to go get it. And he can hold on after the catch, and he can, use his body, use his frame near a defender. So yeah, he had the most yards against zone last year. And then look, Brandon Ayuk, he's not going to ever play as poorly as he did last week. And I don't even think he played poorly. People are just going to remember one of the passes that it was broken up underneath the drop he had in the end zone. But I would imagine he's going to be heavily involved in just the way that the Vikings defense is structured, and like how Flores played last week tells me he doesn't trust his cornerbacks. So they signed Stephon Gilmore late in the year or late in the preseason. Usually guys who haven't played in the training camp. He's probably can't run anymore. Dallas didn't bring him back for a reason. So I think there's going to be a lot of soft zones for Purdy to pick apart. And again, that's Shanahan's specialty, right? Working over the middle of the field. So they do have quite a few advantages here, especially if they're able to hold up.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that was something I wanted to mention too. I didn't have a slide for it, but yeah, I do think Brandon Ayuk has an opportunity to look much better in this game. And I mean, I didn't think he looked terrible in week 1, all things considered, but obviously him talking himself about how he feels he could have done better and he just didn't feel right. I think he's going to want to turn that around this week. And I always look at fantasy matchup, I don't know, all these platforms now that have all this data around who's going to have a plus matchup this week. Well, a lot of them are saying Brandon Ayuk going up against Shaquille Griffin has a plus matchup. So I think this is a good opportunity for him to really get rolling too. And Juwan Jennings, leading receiver in week 1. I definitely think the 49ers maybe want to, up his targets a little bit. He got paid a little extra this offseason, so why not, right? It just increases responsibility a little bit. Looking forward to seeing what these pass catchers look like for the 49ers in week 2. But let's see here. Let's take a look at the Vikings offense for a second. And let me just update the slide. All right. So we've got a couple of, I guess, I don't know how many new faces we have on the offensive side for them. The big one is obviously Sam Darnold,
right?
Who the 49ers are quite familiar with.
Aaron Jones.
Aaron Jones. And he looked pretty decent in week 1 as well. He had a lot of energy, 91 yards, touchdown. But I was very pleased with the 49ers run defense in week 1. I know that was one of the things it was a big question mark for me. And I think for a lot of people going into week 1, we didn't know what that was going to look like. I think they're back to 49ers football. It just looked like the defense we've come to know and love, right? So I think they're doing things that they did pre-Wilkes, and I think it's working for them so far. So I'm not too worried about Aaron Jones. 49ers have a lot of experience playing against him as well. So I think they're going to tap into that as far as also the familiarity they have with Sam Darnold in this game. So I'm kind of looking at Sam Darnold this week as a favorable matchup for the 49ers because it's Sam Darnold. and I know you wrote about this, KP, in your preview, that it's like, just make Sam Darnold be himself and things should go well for the 49ers. I'm not really believing the facade of week 1 with Sam Darnold. I understand he played well, nearly 80% completion percentage, 2 touchdowns. But look, he also had an interception. He can't help himself. I mean, honestly, he was playing against the Giants. I mean, he looked good everywhere else, but 1 interception. And then I was also looking at his stats from last season with the Niners, and I'll just actually throw that up here real quick. I mean, even in very, very limited snaps that he had with the 49ers, mind you, in like garbage time of games, he had 4 turnovers total. You
remember the play against the Rams last year where he rolled to his left, threw it all the way across the field to Kittle, thinking it was to Kittle. Like, there were 2 receivers in the air, but there were also 3 players. It was 40 yards down the field. Like, that is the most Sam Darnold play of all time. He cannot help himself, like you said. And you're wondering, like, can he keep this up another week? I think the question is, well, will the Vikings be up double digits from the second quarter on? Because the game script allowed him to kind of play free. Like, yeah, he completed the first 12 passes of the game, but if you kind of look at the advanced stats, the probability for him to do that in that game was under 1%. So the odds he does it again are very, very, very slim. So as you can see right there, I think is the big one. So the Vikings offensive line, 24th pass block win rate, pressured on 42% of his dropbacks. So he's holding the ball 2.91 seconds time to throw while he's getting pressured. Last week, the center and the right guard both gave up a combined 10 pressures. So that is huge because 49ers, they're getting Gross Matos back. What are they probably going to do with him? They're going to have Floyd on one edge, Bosa on the other, and they're going to be able to put Gross Matos inside. So I think their right guard is in for a big, big challenge. And then you can kind of line up Fred Warner over the center, and that's when you need creative. That's when you can kind of force Darnold into thinking, hey, a blitz is coming. Maybe he falls back out and runs it right into an interception. So there were a couple plays last week where Darnold wanted to so bad throw it to the other team, and the Giants didn't make the play. But he will. He's coming home. Don't you worry.
Yeah, he wants to. It's like, trust us, guys. He wants to throw that pick so bad. And yeah, the time to throw thing is like 2.9 seconds. That's not going to fly against the 49ers. And like, you'll be sacked by then. And if you try to get the ball out quickly, you're probably quicker than that. You're probably rushing a throw, right? You're probably seeing ghosts, like how, we expect Darnold to see ghosts. So yeah, I'm just kind of expecting that things will kind of come back to reality for Sam Darnold. And I'm actually glad he had a good week 1 because he's going to be playing with some false confidence, probably playing his former team. I loved this about Lenore just taking this friendly jab at Darnold. I'm just going to play the clip because it was pretty funny.
I think I win that for sure. I believe I win because, me and Sam, we can have this connection. We like to throw the ball together. So this week coming, we know it. But I know he's a talented player, and he's gonna come ready to work. And I know how he prepared. He gave us great looks. When he played here with us. Just taking over the scout team, he was throwing dimes. So I know it's gonna have to be tight, sticky covers.
His confidence over the last year and a half has gone through the roof, man. Because he was not talking like this when he was first inserted into the lineup. Then last year he kind of figured out, I do belong, and he's a very good player, man. So that is pretty funny. And I think the reason the 49ers will kind of have this success is because they're going to stop the run. So you mentioned Aaron Jones, he ran for 94 yards. He averaged 6.7 yards per carry. He had 5 rushes over 10 yards, but he also had carries of 1, 2, 3, 2, 4, 8, -1, 4, 1. So it was a lot of boom or bust. And last week, if we're talking about something being night and day from last year, so the 49ers could not stop the run at all in 2023. That was one of their biggest issues, especially in the red zone. The 49ers, they allowed -0.6 yards before contact. They allowed the second fewest rushing yards in the week, and they were consistently winning up front. So that was a sight to see. And in looking at the down-to-down stuff for the Vikings and Aaron Jones, you can tell by those how many carries he had that only went for 1 and 2 yards. the 49ers have a chance to force Darnold into these 3rd and 8s, these 3rd and 7s, and that's where you can kind of drop back and kind of confuse him and flood the middle. Like if the Vikings are going to beat you over the middle where Fred Warner is, where like honestly the past 3 years they have historic numbers defending the pass because of 54. So like if he gets over on you because of Fred Warner, then so be it. But again, take Jefferson away, funnel everything to the middle, and then make 14 just double, triple hitch, and I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, make him do what he does best, which is throw picks, man. So ultimately, that's where I feel confident about the 49ers. Like, yes, I do expect that maybe there's going to be some complications for Brock Purdy, but I still think the rest of the offense should be able to play well as well. We know how good Brock Purdy is against the blitz, so he'll figure it out in this game. Darnold, I think, just like we've been saying, I just think he's going to be the reason the Vikings lose this game, in my opinion. And I think a big thing for the 49ers in this game is to capitalize on any opportunities they get. I think one of the things we saw in week 1, yeah, Jake Moody, 6 for 6. Awesome. That means you're also not like right. So I think that's something the 49ers is going to look to correct this week against the Vikings. Probably, if I had to imagine, a point of emphasis for them going into this week. So yeah, hopefully they get that done. I do expect the total score to be lower for the 49ers than it was last week. I'm predicting 23-13, only because like for some reason, KP, like the 49ers have had weird games in Minnesota.
Oh, it's a tough place to play.
Yeah, and they haven't won since 1992 in Minnesota. So I'm still expecting the win, but I don't think they're going to put up like 30-plus points in this one.
Yeah, it's tough to predict this team because I would have never guessed that they would have scored as many points last week against the Jets. And you could make an argument that they probably should have had closer to 45 than what they did just because of those red zone or not capitalizing in the red zone. So like Flores, like he's going to have some different looks. We're not going to see what we saw from the Giants last week when he was just kind of sitting back. So like you would assume that they're going to have the 49ers offense a bit confused. Like, will Mason run for 140 yards again? Probably not. So like there's going to be some regression to the mean in that sense. But at the same time, like there's no evidence to suggest that Brock will be poor against the blitz because he was literally the league leader in like 5 different categories last year against the blitz. They're going to have a plan to get Brandon Ayuk involved, I'd imagine, just kind of building his confidence. And like we said, Debo as an option against zone, Juwan Jennings being featured more. Like they have so many weapons where like most teams would kill to score like 24 points. And that seems like the floor for the 49ers, at least with Brock under center when he has his weapons. And again, Trent Williams has another week under his belt of practice. So you would assume that they're even better. So I'm thinking 23-16, 24-17 around that area, just because I think they're able to hit one of their explosive plays with Jefferson or with somebody. Darnold is going to YOLO ball in and probably make it, but he's also going to turn the ball over like you touched on too. So I think I'll go 23-16. Oh no, let's say 23-17 final answer.
Final answer. All right. We locked it in. One last question here from Technic Chic. Darnold knows in last year's Vikings game was about Wilkes' defense, not necessarily Ryan Sala or Sorensen's defense. How much does that affect things? I mean, I think that's a great point because the only 49ers defense that Darnold did know was the Steve Wilkes defense, right? Like, yes, he's familiar with the personnel, maybe some of each individual's tendencies, but like, I think we already saw in week 1, it's going to be slightly different than the Steve Wilkes defense. And so maybe Sam Darnold not at like his familiarity, not going to be as much of a factor in this game, I don't think.
Yeah, Wilkes blitzed the house on 3rd down. Like he was not shy about it all. He was uber aggressive on 3rd down. Last week, Sorensen only blitzed Rodgers on 9% of his dropbacks. So it's definitely going to be a change in that sense. And I would say like if anything, Sorensen has the upper hand knowing that he saw Darnold every day in practice because that was a scout team. So I'm sure he's going to have some different looks where, he changes up coverages. He has a cornerback squatting. And I honestly, after that clip, I would probably bet on Lenore getting an interception.
Yeah, I definitely think so too. I thought he would in week 1. He batted the pass
Yeah,
that got intercepted. So he's around the ball. I think he's gonna have an impact in this game. Make sure you guys check out KP's latest article. It's the 49ers Vikings preview, and it's titled How the 49ers Will Make Sam Darnold Go Full Sam
never
Darnold.
want
You
to
never
go full
go
Sam
full
Darnold.
Sam Darnold, KP.
Never do.
You never do it. But that's what we're going to see on Sunday, or that's what we're expecting. So make sure you guys check that out. I got the link for that in the description of this video. Audio listeners, you can see it in the podcast description as well. Thank you, everyone that tuned in. You guys kept the live chat, popping here. We even got Vikings fans in the live chat. Okay, we'll take
Viking
that.
Jerome.
Viking Jerome says Vikings will win this one. All right, we'll just have to wait and see. But thank you so much to everyone that tuned in. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Leave a rating, leave a review for the audio listeners. But for now, have a good rest of your Friday, folks. Talk to you on Sunday. Peace.